Hi everybody, I hope you're doing marvelously well. We're back with episode 3 in the studio build series. This has been interesting because I'm building a studio inside of my old house, inside of my kids' bedroom. And it's small and it's been a lot of fun, and we've been doing it using off-the-shelf stuff that you can buy. I don't know about you, but I'm incredibly busy. As much as I'd like to build panels, I don't have the time. So I have been working closely with Sweetwater. So thank you, Sweetwater, for helping out with this. Mike Arango is my old engineer from 15 years ago, and he's a sales associate over there. So today we're going to talk to him. Stay tuned. Hi everybody, hope you're doing marvelously well. This is part 3. The third part of the studio build. If you look behind me, you'll see the desk is up. You'll see obviously all the panels. If you haven't seen parts 1 and 2, go back and check them out. Now, the links are down below. So with part 3, I have on the line here, ready to go, Mike Arango over at Sweetwater. I go to him with questions about gear because I respect him and know he knows what he's talking about. That's really kind of a big deal for me. You know, if I'm asking some questions about gear that I haven't yet tried, for instance, I want it from an engineer's perspective, not just from a sales perspective. Obvious thing to say, but I thought I would bring it up. So Mike is on the other line. Today we're going to talk about interfaces, and we're also going to talk about speakers. And this is not only a studio build for me. Obviously, it's a studio build. We're building a new room. We're going to be doing a lot of work in here. But also because, you know, we have Produce Like a Pro, the YouTube channel, it serves another greater purpose. And that purpose is for an opportunity to try out some equipment that I wouldn't normally try out. So we're going to look at 3 different price points on interfaces with 3 different things that they need to do. Something that's maybe 1 or 2 input that's very inexpensive that you can all afford, an entry-level one. And then maybe something else that's in the 2 input kind of area, but a little higher quality maybe something that comes with plugins, and there's a few of those around. And then last but no means least, I'm going to ask Mike what he thinks is the best, say, value for money multiple input interface. So if I want to record some live drums in a guerrilla style in the front room, I can. So without further ado, Mike, how are you?
Hey Warren, I'm doing all right. I saw some pictures of the room, and I guess you're actually sitting in it right now, so it sounds a heck of a lot more controlled.
When we first came in here, it was like an echo chamber, or at least a...
Yeah, exactly.
I could have put a speaker at one end and a microphone at the other, and we could have had like our own reverb chamber. Gavin did an amazing job. I've never actually, in a home studio environment, had panels above like this, and it makes a huge difference.
That's one of the reflection points, definitely, and people don't always think about that. But yeah, controlling the reflections from the ceiling, those first reflection points, just like the walls.
So as far as like the entry level 2 input, what are the options here?
The first thing to talk about, I think, when you're looking at an interface, there's a few things. Going to be the connection protocol, or the way that you're connecting to the computer. What is this computer going to have? Is it one of the new Macs that's going to have Thunderbolt as well as USB?
I think we're going to go with Thunderbolt because we need to have a lot of options, you know, for different interfaces that, like you're pointing out, some of them are only Thunderbolt now. But I do realize that on the cheaper end, on the, you know, 1 or 2 input interfaces, they aren't all Thunderbolt. In fact, most of them are USB still. Is that correct?
Definitely, yeah. So Thunderbolt will be a little bit more expensive, but it's going to offer lower latency specs, and that's a big benefit at this point, is the higher bandwidth, the higher throughput, which will allow you to not have to worry as much about the latency like you have had to with USB traditionally. With USB interfaces, people have been using them for years, but there's always this bit of a dance of having to increase and lower the buffer settings between recording and mix, and that whole dance of trying to minimize latency as much as possible. With Thunderbolt, you don't have to think about that quite as much. You just are the engineer or the musician in that case recording. There are definitely some great USB options, and the USB options can sound amazing. We just want to keep in mind that there is that potential for higher latency.
I want to keep this on the sort of $150 and below, but I do still want quality. So I'm going to go through some of these things here. So I'm scrolling through. I see a Behringer at $45. I see M Audio enters the market at $49.
We tend to have pretty good luck with most of these USB interfaces. The drivers are pretty solid with all of them at this point, and a lot of them are class compliant. So they're literally just plug and play on a Macintosh via Core Audio. When you start to get up to the $150 range, like you were saying, there's going to be options from PreSonus, Focusrite. Audient makes a great interface at that price point. The preamps apparently are the same or very similar all the way up through their line, including up to their high-end consoles. Definitely a difference with the power supply, the headroom, all that kind of stuff, but apparently the componentry is similar, kind of like with the SSL stuff. When you're looking at their EQs versus consoles, it's all the same part.
Julian Klaus is a really good friend of mine. In fact, we're going to do a whole series of videos together on interfaces, like everything. The Audient Evo 4 takes some beating. And what I've enjoyed is like talking to him, who comes from a completely analytical engineering perspective, because he's actually an engineer, not a musical engineer, but an engineer. All the audience stuff comes up super, super quiet, tons of headroom. At $130, it's $129. I think we'll go with that. We'll go with the Evo 4. I know it well. I love you know what I love about it, and I think it probably really helped, was that the JFET input on that means that when you plug a guitar in and you're using amp sims, it gives you a pretty darn good sounding guitar DI. I do know that IK do that as well. They have a really good guitar one in that. Their iRig is specifically designed for guitars. But in this instance, I'm not going to assume that the only people watching our video are guitar players.
Yeah, definitely. No, the Evo would be a great solution. That's one to try out on the USB.
So I've got knowledge of them. I like it. I think it will be a good thing. Let's get the Evo 4. I really want to do with the mid-price, comes with a lot of added features plus Thunderbolt, is probably look to an Apollo in here. We've not had an Apollo in the studio that we use day to day.
So the Apollo has become a relative standard. A lot of guys have them for their main rigs or for portable systems. I use one for my portable system. And not only is the line scalable, so you have the 2-input twin, you have their 8-input box with either 4 or 8 preamps, and you also have their 16-input box, which is just line inputs. So for somebody who has a bunch of outboard, they can do a 16-input box or multiple of those to scale it all the way up. Beyond that, with the twin, for example, you get to choose how much processing you have. And this is the same processing that's in their DSP cards. They're what they call the satellites, and then also the cards to go into the PCI slots in the computer. Those offer dedicated processing for their plugins. And the cool thing about that is while each of their plugins uses a different amount, their Shadow Hills emulations definitely use more processing, way more processing than their SSL EQ, for example. You know exactly how many instances of each of those plugins you're going to get when instantiating them in the DAW session. It's not dependent upon the computer for hosting.
There's a lot of people watching that are interested in knowing, I would have used an Apollo in here. I've never used one. So but it does come up. What is its main competition, just so I have an idea?
There's going to be options. Apogee has one that actually will host its own plugins. So that's, as far as the DSP end of things, that's one thing to think of. As far as just, there's a lot that goes into this. So as far as the sound quality, you can talk about RME. You can look at other options that are going to be good sounding interfaces.
Are those Thunderbolt though?
They do have Thunderbolt options. The connection protocol to the computer, in addition to the number of inputs and all those kind of considerations, have to go into really considering what box to send out. I think with the Apollo, they also have the Unison pre's. So when you're switching the models of preamps or of guitar amp emulations, in this case, you're not getting just distortion modeling. You're also getting, you'll hear the relays click in the box, and it's actually changing the input impedance as well, so it will push back against the microphone or the instrument the same way. So that really may be a good solution for you to try for that category that you're asking about.
In the main studio in the other room, we don't have any UAD stuff in there, so I don't even, when I'm demoing stuff, I don't use UAD plugins. So what I want to be able to do is also in this room, be able to, do mixing in the box using some UAD stuff, because I get asked all the time. I want us to represent, obviously, all the companies, because we're trying to be best possible of service to people as we can. Okay, I think let's do the twin. What is your recommendation for affordable 8 input interface that's, something that's affordable, that sounds good. So on those, I wouldn't say rare, but on those occasions, because I have a piano in the front room and upright, maybe I did some drums in there the other day. What do you think? What's affordable?
There are all kinds of options, of course, for 8 input boxes. There are things like we talked about, the Auroras, of which we're both fans. There are going to be options from Motu. Their drivers are always very solid. We could take a look at PreSonus. They make that Quantum TB.
We have a lot of followers who use their stuff. I have not touched on it at all, so I think that's a really smart idea. So what's it called? It's called the Quantum.
Yeah, if you type in Quantum TB, and that one's going to be 8 inputs, but then you can expand it up to, I think that one actually allows you to expand it up to 20 some inputs, 24 plus the SPIDA, so you'd have 26 inputs as well. So that's another option aside from what we were talking about earlier, where you can use multiple interfaces and use them as aggregate devices and kind of stack them on top of each other. This allows it to have one lane into the computer, where it's one connection to the computer and then everything else is going through that single interface. So long story short, somebody can start out with an 8-channel box like this, and down the road, if you're doing those drums there and you decide that you want additional inputs, whether it's for other instruments or scratch tracks or just additional mics for the drums, you could always add on one of many boxes that are available from Behringer, Focusrite, et cetera, that'll expand that box.
So wait there. So is this it here? It's called a PreSonus Quantum 26 by 32 Thunderbolt 2 audio interface.
Correct.
$1,000 for 8 inputs is pretty huge.
Yep, and the trade-off there is the DSP versus not having it and having more inputs effectively. So I think that would be a great option for you guys to try out.
Does it come with the Studio One software?
Pretty much everything PreSonus sends out comes with Studio One Artist, and it's a pretty capable DAW for what it is, and of course you can upgrade from there to the professional version.
Fantastic. Let's talk speakers. So I'm feeling like we're going powered speakers here. We could do power amp and speakers, and I do think long term this room may end up doing things like that when we're trying out different speakers. I might go and invest in a power amp. It's very rare for me these days to think I would ever buy another pair of speakers like that, unless it was something super retro. In the hi-fi world and in mastering engineers, a lot of them have separate power amp blocks and stuff, but I think all the options we're looking here are going to be that. And then the second thing is, Mike, I don't know in this size of room, are we going to need a 3-way speaker, or are we going to stay with 2-way?
Yeah, so the powered versus passive thing, I totally agree with you. There are some higher end monitors that we sell and some lower end ones. They're still passive, but for the majority of the rooms, we're talking about powered speakers. The benefit is that the amplifiers, they're generally bi-amped or tri-amped, and the amplifiers after the crossover point, so you end up with a lower powered amplifier for the high frequency driver, a larger amplifier for the low frequency driver. It ends up being more efficient, as opposed to having one amplifier pushing both, or pushing before the crossover into both drivers. I totally agree with that.
It definitely makes sense. And look, I want ease. I want to take a pair of cables from the back of an interface and plug them into a pair of speakers. What's your feeling on the 3-way in this room?
Well, a 2-way versus a 3-way speaker, it doesn't have to be necessarily a larger speaker, although the low frequency driver generally will be larger. The benefits there, in my opinion, are going to be that you're going to have a mid-frequency driver that will be dedicated just to those mid-frequencies. It does two things. You end up with a better sounding monitor, a more accurate sounding monitor in the mid-range, but it also then pushes the crossover points out of the really crucial mid-range. NS10s are what they are, and they have plenty of people that love them, plenty of detractors, but their crossover point was right at 2K. So to be able to push it out of that range, that's huge. There are some manufacturers. Alan Sides was in here talking about his Oceanway monitors here several months ago, and he and I had a conversation about 2-way versus 3-way, and he had come up with a way to push the crossover point of his 2-ways to get it out of that crucial mid-range, and his monitors sound amazing. So there's ways to do it on a 2-way.
So with the sort of entry-ish level, I suppose that's like a $300-400 pair of speakers. Oh, I see some of them you're pricing in pairs. That's cool. I see the Rockets, but they're only 5-inch. I have a lot of friends that use KRK, and we've done some stuff with KRK, and their sub, for instance, is phenomenal sounding. But I definitely want a 6 to 8-inch drivers in here. I don't think they need to be any bigger than that, but that's kind of what I'm thinking. I'm thinking 2-way. It's not a huge room, and it's but it's big enough, I think, to project. I think, but 5-inch seems quite small to me, at least when I've worked on them. I feel like if I got a 5-inch driver, I'm going to want to put a sub underneath.
The 5-inch will oftentimes require a sub to support that bottom octave, definitely. Yeah, in that kind of price point for speakers, we get great feedback on the JBLs that are right in that range. We send a ton of those out. Definitely the KRKs are there. PreSonus makes some good monitors. The fact of the matter is that people can learn and get used to any monitor, but we're ultimately looking for the best tool that we can find, the speaker that'll best translate to other rooms. The good news is that the speakers in that price point are so much better than they were 10 years ago. I mean, it's really a great time for anybody to be getting into this thing. As far as the Callies, I wasn't necessarily sure what to expect when we picked them up here, but they did come in so we could listen to them here, and they're really decent sounding monitors for that price point. And one of the things that I found kind of interesting, this seems kind of like a small dollar amount, but they said, we don't spend the $10 on the shiny box. We put that extra $10 back into the R&D and manufacturing, which at a speaker of that price point, that's huge.
I agree entirely. If they can improve the contents of it and not worry about what it looks like on the outside, makes a huge difference. I think the LP6s are going to make sense for us in here. Obviously, for everybody watching, we're going to swap out speakers. Each week you're going to see a new video, and I'm going to be using different kinds of speakers to try out different stuff. I mean, that's what we do. We test out stuff. But I think starting off with the LP6s, which I know really well from the other room, is going to be useful because I think it will give me a starting point. There's no way I'm going to put a pair of 1032s up here. There's certainly not enough room. I'm not going to get my huge focals in here. So I think the only thing that I know well that's going to fit up on here is going to be the LP6s. I've almost got a couple of things that I really want to do. I really want to put the Adam A7Xs in here because I have friends that make speakers that are cheaper and I have friends that make speakers that are more expensive. And all of them call that kind of a best in class at the price range. And I've never owned a pair, and frankly, I don't know if I've ever heard a pair. Are they a huge seller for you, the A7Xs?
Yeah, the Adam, those are probably their most popular seller out of their line, but all the way up and down the line, they're great sounding speakers. And of course, the ribbon tweeters are a little gentler sounding. They do translate to a wider sweet spot when it comes down to it for monitoring. So that's always nice. But yeah, great monitors. Yeah,
I really want to do it. I mean, I feel quite strongly about that. It's to say that they come up in conversation on a daily basis would be the understatement of the decade. People are always comparing a new product that's more expensive or cheaper to that speaker. They're obviously dominant in their price range. I think it would make absolute perfect sense for us to have a pair here. Also, I feel like I have a responsibility to listen to things in the way other people are listening to them. And hey, I want a pair. So let's get a pair of those. So really it just comes down to sort of that 2000-ish speaker kind of range. But what's your sort of gut? With that kind of price range, what do you feel strongly about?
Well, there are plenty of options there if we're looking in the range that it sounds like you are. If you wanted to try a three-way, those Dynaudio LYDs, the LYD 48s I was really, really impressed with those when they came in and we got to listen to those. And that's a true three-way. The focals that you mentioned, the focal-shaped twins, I think, those are what's called a 2.5-way, or what Focal calls a 2.5-way. That's the same as their regular twin 6s. I had those for years. And it's basically you have a high frequency and a low frequency driver, and then you have a second low frequency driver that picks up at, I can't remember the number, but somewhere around 100 and some hertz down, and it just reinforces that range. And what I noticed, at least with the solo 6s versus the twin 6s, was that it brought the kick and the bass forward, and then when playing back on other systems, that would get pulled back a little bit, of course, and everything sat how it should. That was my personal experience with it. The other thing I've noticed is that Focal all the way up and down the line, they're voiced similarly. Yeah. They all sound familiar.
We felt that as well. We really did feel like with the Focals that no matter which ones you were using, there's something about the high end that I really like. When we did a SonarWorks shootout, we had 3 sets of speakers up there, and we flattened all the speakers out. And the things that I learned were the Callies just sounded incredible once flattened out. The Genelecs were amazing, but they were already amazing. They're $8,000 pair of speakers. But the Focals, I can't remember what it was. I feel like it was the Shapes, but it was the Shape Twins. Sounded really beautiful, but still sounded sweet in the high end. Sweet's a terrible word to use, but they kept the characteristic of the sound. I think it's something about their aluminium magnesium inverted dome tweeter. I mean, I went to the factory and I feel strongly about this company. I feel like they really give a schnizzle. They really care.
They make good monitors, and in their 6 line, the Solo, Twin, and Trio, those are going to be their beryllium drivers. These are in the Shape series, it's the aluminum magnesium. They're all that inverted dome design for the tweeter, and that reduces phase distortion.
I feel pretty good about those. I think that's what I want to get. I think the Cali, Adam, Cali we know, and it's going to be good for me in this room because I'm going to know how they sound. So that's a nice. That makes me feel warm and fuzzy. Adam, A7Xs, get asked about them 20 times a day. I said 20, getting old. Anyway, and then of course the Focals, it's sort of like a combo platter. I've never used the Shape 65s, but I feel like I'm going to be safe with those in the room. And I also feel like they're going to cover all those price points. We've gone with these 3 monitors, but bear in mind that we're building another room that we can try out monitors. And we've got the A7Xs because they're so requested by you. But there are other monitors that are heavily requested. So we will be trying out some other ones as well. What I love about being able to build this room is we now have a room which is relatively, similar to what most people are going to be using. This is not a big room. This is quite a small room. It's a kid's bedroom. I actually had both my kids sharing this, believe it or not. But that's probably most people in the world. This whole house here, this little house, is only 850 square feet, 2 bedroom, 1 bathroom. This is a house I lived in for many, many years with my kids. We weren't living in a huge mansion. We just lived in a nice little area up here. So I think this is very, very comparable to what so many people, have. So I'm very, very excited to have this room and be able to test out so many different monitors. Would love to know actually below, we've made our choices here on monitors. I mean, what are your choices? What do you use? Tell us a little bit about your studio. What is your setup? So 2 things for us to talk about are, we're going to probably need an extra pair of stands here, because if I put the monitor in the middle, which is essentially what we're going to do, is there any stands we could get that basically are a little bit more like, I've got like a wider plinth on them, so we could actually have them kind of extend the top of the desk almost? Is that possible? I know we want to do ISO pucks. We're already using them successfully in the other room. So we can have the ISO pucks so that will decouple the decoupling, as I like to talk about. I don't want to get 2 stands if possible. I'd like to just kind of get extensions. Could it be the same level as the desk? And then I put a pair of speakers that's maybe on the stand and half on the stand and half on the desk, and then still have room for another pair of speakers? Or do I have to get two sets of stands? What do you think?
So regardless of the level of the speaker that we go with, we're going to try to decouple them as best we can from whatever they're set on. So whether that's a stand or the desk, anything that you set the cabinet of the speaker on becomes an extension of the speaker.
Sure.
And everything will have a resonant frequency, and that's not ideal. So we're going to try to decouple them ideally, especially from the desk, certainly from the stands that we put them on. There are plenty of options for that. I know that you guys have some of the ISO pucks there. There are going to be the ISO acoustics stabilizers. There's going to be the Primeacoustic recoils. They're all taking a different angle on decoupling. The ISO acoustic ones, they move freely with the speaker on top of it as it fires. Everything from the RLX foam ones, the Mopads and the ProPads, up to the recoil stabilizers that do have the metal plate on top of them to add some more mass. Their goal is to keep the speaker from moving at all and to allow the driver just to fire. But the most important thing that all those are doing is decoupling the speaker from whatever you're putting it on. So in this case, I would think that we'd want to have a speaker stand that would allow, even if the speaker is extending out over the desk, over the shelf there, we're going to want it to not touch that shelf.
Is there anything that does 40 inches and a quarter, just in case we have to have it kind of on the stand or half off? Definitely be nice to, and to be honest, it's just been definitely nice regardless to have it all the same height. So I'm looking at these RAB speaker stands here, RAB, Audio Pro Rack, SDM 100s. How infinitely variable are those? I can't tell in the picture.
So the RAB solution, as well as those from Argosy and Ultimate Support, I don't know how infinitely adjustable they are. I think that you can adjust them in levels of a couple of inches. That at 40, with something to decouple the speakers on top of it. Because the thing is that with all these speakers, you're going to have different height boxes. Some of them, if you have let's say you orient the shapes on their side, that's going to be a different intended listening height. You're going to want your ear generally to be in the middle of the speaker, or generally between the low frequency and high frequency driver. So every speaker that you guys put in there is going to be a little bit different. Now, with something like this, we could do something like one of the RAB speaker stands, which are adjustable from 36 to 42 inches, and we could put them at the same height as the desk or even a little bit lower. And once the pucks or the isoacoustics or recoil stabilizers, whatever we're going to use at that point to decouple them, is in place, that'll take it up a little bit above the desk. You know, I had Focal twins for years that were on a base plate on a stand and then a isolation device that was way smaller than that speaker. As long as it's not squishing that whatever's supposed to be decoupling it and recoupling it to the speaker, then it doesn't really matter. It doesn't have to be the same size as the speaker. So in this case, to directly answer your question before, you could have the decoupling device here take it up a tiny bit above the desk, have the speakers hang out over the desk and still be safe, still be centered or relatively centered on those stands. And that way we're taking the desk out of the equation and we're not turning that into a giant extension of the speaker cab.
Yeah, we're definitely going to use the ISO pucks, and when the speakers get here, we've got the stands here, I might come back to you and say, okay, what else do we need? And we'll look at some other options. But I like the look of these RAB stands. The ones I'm looking at here maybe need a bigger base, a bigger, surface area. It looks like the SDM 100s make more sense because they have a total width plate of 14.5 inches. I'd rather have more than I need than less than I need.
Yeah, so that would allow you to use it with much larger speakers. The size of the plate of the stand doesn't need to be the same size as the speaker, but in this case, yeah, if we're gonna, you don't know exactly what speakers you're gonna end up with in there ultimately, or rather, I should say, you're gonna be testing some out and switching them out. It sounds like
low capacity is at 100 pounds here, and some of these bigger speakers that I'm probably going to try out in here are 100 pounds. 100 pounds makes a lot more sense than 50. I mean, we've got some big speakers. We've got Trio 11s. I'd be much happier with a pair of Trio 11s sitting on these than I would be on the others, which are 50 or 75. I'd rather have more than we need and be safe. I do like this, that you've got all of their models and then you've got comparable ones in similar price range that I can check what they do. That's smart.
We're here to help and do what we do and to talk through options for your room and to make sure we're getting the right thing for your situation. But yeah, our webpage, they try to make it as much of a tool as possible to be able to compare different pieces that are all in the same price point or not.
Yeah, it's smart. So let's just say, these are fixed stands, so I'm not going to go to the ultimate support. But if I did want to, I can click on the ultimate support. No disrespect to the ultimate support, we need a specific size. But if I go to that, so it allows me to see differences between adjustable and other fixed ones. Yeah, it's cool. I do like the look of these Gator stands. I mean, it does look pretty tasty to go in the room, but at 36.5 inches, it's really nice looking. It doesn't give me a very big plate on top, which is a little concerning, but I do like the design beautifully. I don't think this is a rabbit hole we're going to go down. I think we're going to go with the RAB. I want to explore this stuff because people are going to be watching and they're going to want to know what options there are. With that Gator stand, which looks really nice bit of furniture, I think what we're probably going to have to do is get those stands, and unfortunately, this is just a reality when you're building a studio. Get the stands in and figure this out. I've got a different situation, I think, to a lot of people that are watching this, because I want to have multiple speakers available for us to listen to and try things out. And also I want, for those of you watching, I also want to have stands here available that I can put anything on when, we're testing something new out. The advantage of having the two rooms is we're going to be able to try them in different environments. That studio is quite big. The actual studio itself is about the same size as this house. And then this is just a small bedroom in a small house. So it gives us a whole different way of trying things out. Mike, thank you ever so much for this. This has been absolutely phenomenal. We've got more coming, more videos, more discussions. I'm going to be coming back to you with even questions about speakers and interfaces in the future, and God bless it.
This is great. I'm going to enjoy seeing it come together.
Thank you ever so much. So long, farewell.
Talk to you soon.
Auf Wiedersehen, au revoir. Please leave a whole bunch of comments and questions below. Let us know about your home studio environment, what you use, and if you have suggestions, because we're going to be doing future videos. This isn't just like the end of it. That's it. These are the speakers we're going to have. No, we are going to be swapping stuff out and trying it, and we love to know what you love, because we get help a lot about this stuff. Thanks ever so much. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.